Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, the host of Unlocked, a show all about developing the resilient leader in you. Today, my guest is Danielle Hughes. She's going to talk about how you and I can actually improve our marketing efforts, starting with the words we use and how we put them together. Writing marketing materials is probably the one task I procrastinate doing more than anything else. I'll even fire someone before I'll write a marketing piece. So I'm front and center to hear what Danielle can teach me. And as usual, after our conversation, I'll be sharing grounds for thought with you. So stay tuned for what is brewing. Well, welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much. It's funny. It just occurred to me. I'm like, should I call you Dr. Blair?
No, call me Madelyn.
Okay. Okay. But I do feel like you earned the honorific and you should be using it. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for asking, and
of
thank you for
course.
thinking of that. All right. Well, to my audience, welcome back. I'm Madelyn Blair, your host, and our amazing guest today is Danielle Hughes, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is currently the Chief Personality Officer at More Than Words Marketing, where she focuses on helping other individuals and companies write authentic content. This is backed up by her extensive experience in many other companies. She's the board member at the Graphic Artists Guild, chairperson of the Amazing Community Advisory Board, senior associate writer at Catalyst, senior copywriter at House Party, president and co-founder of Baby Fish Mouth Children's T-shirt company. I love that name, even if I can't say it. She's a project manager and copywriter at Nickelodeon and the director of sales development at ABC. Wow. What a what a panoply of options you bring to the table.
Oh, thank you. I was like, oh my God, those are all such old jobs.
Well, who cares?
I know. It's okay. It's just so
They were
funny.
but it's still part is what formed you. And in fact, that's my first question. You've had great a variety of experiences in your background. I
Mm,
mean, Nickelodeon to Baby Fish Mouth. I got it. I got it that
there you
time.
go.
Catalyst, ABC. Which one of them do you feel did the most to form your work?
Mm. Well, so it's interesting because Baby Fish Mouth was my first entrepreneurial venture. So it was an infant and toddler t-shirt company. Then we took famous movie quotes and we put like a baby spin on them. And everyone came in like a popcorn box. And so I think that like forced me to really like have to figure everything out. So even though I had a business partner as one of my best friends from college, we didn't know anything about forming a business or even marketing a business. Even though I was a marketer, I didn't know how to market a business. I've never sold a product before. This was like not pre-internet, but like pre-social media. And it definitely made me kind of figure out my own resourcefulness and learned how to network. And I was networking with other mompreneurs, as we called ourselves. Like we were
Yep.
all moms who were starting our own business. And so I think I just learned so much about like grit and determination and hustle
Yeah.
from that role. And also like doing that at the same time as having a full-time job because it was a side hustle. It wasn't a real job. Even though we wanted it to be, we could never get it off the ground in the way that it needed to be. So
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your response to that because I think people often don't appreciate what it means to become an entrepreneur.
yeah,
There are lessons that you can learn no other way.
agreed.
Your toes are in the fire.
Yeah, and I didn't even at the time think, "Oh, I'm gonna become an entrepreneur again." Like, it wasn't
Yeah, I
like I
got
had
you.
the bug. Like, it didn't work after, we had it for years, we basically broke even, and we were like, "Let's just
Okay.
cut our losses."
Yeah.
And then I was really still working, quote unquote, full time. So I just thought, I'm just going to do this. And then at some point, that also just, I was like, I can't work for another person anymore. What am I doing? I need to work. I need to work for myself. So
Oh, how many women have told me that same story?
I mean, almost all of them, right?
Yeah,
Every woman
right.
who's an entrepreneur
Yeah,
is either accidental or was pushed out or something and just
yeah.
felt like there's no other option for
There's
me.
no other option,
Yeah.
right? Well, on another subject, I loved reading your website, but
Thank
I was
you.
but I was most intrigued with genuine personality brand.
Yes.
I'd like to begin with you talking about what is this thing called genuine personality brand?
Yeah. So when I started my company, I had gone from being a freelance copywriter for several years and just feeling super generic and super forgettable. And I knew that, I'd been hearing in my head from people, you have to niche down, you have to pick your audience, all of this. And I ended up finding a coach who worked with creative professionals, and she was the first person to tell me to put some of my personality into my
Yeah.
website messaging. And, coming out of corporate, I was reluctant because what does that have to do with anything, right? Shouldn't people hire you for your expertise and your experience? And, I couldn't connect the dots, but she basically forced me. And her thought was, they're going to find out anyway. So you might as well put some of yourself onto the page. And in part of this process of, honing my own voice and my message, I started writing a newsletter. And one of my first newsletters was, I had this thought for the difference between personal brand and our personality, because personal means private. And I just never understood why we're expected to have personal brands. But our personality is who we are. That's what forges and fosters connection.
Yeah.
And so, how do you bring part of your personality into your professional message to create those connections? And that just started to be the thing that I started to talk about. And, at first, like anything, nobody paid attention, and then probably revisited it and kept bringing it up and bringing it up. And, finally, people started to say, what is this personality brand thing? And the more I started to explain it, the more I got people like nodding their heads like, yes, this is what I've been thinking about. This is why I haven't put myself out there, because personal felt like it was all or
Yeah.
nothing. But the personality piece, I feel like, puts you in control, right? Just like any interaction, we're always deciding what we want other people to see of
Yeah.
ourselves. And so why shouldn't that carry over into your professional message?
You've convinced me.
Okay.
Because I have fought this. You know,
Yeah.
as and I think it's as a woman, we really are aware that we are judged so much on things that we think are irrelevant.
Mm.
And so we end up taking a lot of time and effort ticking off boxes. Okay, I've got my bachelor's degree, I've got my master's degree, I've got my PhD, I've written my books. And yet, in the end, you're right. We are a person. And one of the things that oftentimes people will say after they've worked with me for a while, gee, you're so much fun to work with, Madeline. And I go, really?
Yeah. Right. But
In a way, you can't hide who you are.
agreed. But so the thing is, but you're also doing a disservice if you are hiding that,
Yeah,
because then you might not get people who reach
yeah,
out to even find out that you are enjoyable and funny. And, what I find with a lot of people is that their bios seem either very unapproachable, right? Like, this person is so accomplished. What could they possibly, I could never have a conversation.
yeah,
Or you have zero idea what they might be like, or they seem super boring, and it's striking that balance between, I can be super accomplished and have all this expertise, but I also like to have fun, and here's some hobbies, and here's ways that we can connect
mhm,
beyond what we just do professionally. And how do we start the conversation based on
yeah,
that and then get into the work?
yeah. Well, there's another word that comes out of your website. Excuse me. And that's authenticity.
Mm.
And I wonder if you just expand on that a little bit, because I think we talk a lot about authenticity, but I'm not sure we know exactly what that means when you're talking about marketing.
And I think, last year, authentic was the word of the year, right, for the Oxford English Dictionary, which is so interesting to me because I feel also like that word has lost a lot of its meaning and significance, right? It does feel overused and watered down, but at the crux, it's still the best word to describe just being true to yourself, right?
Mm,
Holding tight to who you are, holding tight to your values, and trying to show up as naturally as you can.
mm,
And I really feel like, this is not about bringing your whole self to work or showing everything about you,
mhm,
but it's what is enough for you to bring to the table that makes you feel the most comfortable so that you can do your best work while still maintaining boundaries and whatever those boundaries are to you. And every person is different.
mm.
So I think authenticity is just the most natural you can be so that you can perform your best. And again, foster those connections, which we all
Mhm.
need to build relationships professionally, no matter who you work for or what you do.
Well, wasn't it? I want to say Laertes who said in one of Shakespeare's plays, "To thine own self be
Be
true."
true. Exactly, exactly.
Oh,
And I
okay,
think a lot of us think that we're being true to ourselves, but we're hiding too
yeah.
much. And how do we not hide as much?
Oftentimes we use things like our website or our LinkedIn profile to share ourselves with the world.
Hmm.
What is something that you've seen people use to show a little bit of their personality in those?
You mean on your website or in
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
yeah.
I mean, I think, on LinkedIn, to me, the most interesting thing on anybody's LinkedIn title is if they put a little fun nugget at the end. You tell me what you do
Ah,
for fun. So, I mean, I have seen and worked with clients on just about everything you could think of, from, summiting Everest to connoisseur of vinyl to amateur mixologist, recovering DJ, weightlifter, so many things, because it's so much easier to be like, I have a sense of them, who this person is from that little thing, than if you tell me that you're like a change agent or an executive this or a VP of that, which doesn't really mean much to me. But that little personal nugget is the way in the door for connection.
oh, wow, such a simple tweak that you
So
can make.
so simple, so simple. And
Yeah.
then of course, like, ideally we want to elevate that. And what is the through line of either your story or your career, or does this hobby kind of factor in somehow to how you approach your work and how you
Mhm.
think, and how do we weave the narrative? But
Yeah.
the baby step is just give me that little hobby, just give me something interesting at
Something.
the end of your bio that somebody can ask you about.
Okay, good. Well, there's see, this is all coming off of your website.
That's okay, that's
It is
okay, you
so
did your homework,
informative.
I appreciate it.
Now, one of the things you talk about is, of course, when you're marketing, you're trying to get to the right audience, and you spend, oh my goodness, I can't
Yes.
imagine how many years I've spent thinking about my audience and who it is. But then you said you also want to repel the wrong audience.
Yeah.
And I'm going, repel? I never thought about repelling anybody.
Yeah.
Why would tell me what's the rationale behind that?
So we're not offending anyone, we're repelling them. So it's very different. The goal with your message is to do the vetting for you, right? So
Ah,
if you are in business, you do not want to be constantly taking calls with prospects that go nowhere because they don't understand you, or they don't understand what you're offering them, or they're not a right fit. So the more that we can be ourselves on the page, so to speak, the more
mhm.
likely the right people are going to respond to that and
Mm,
reach out. So the ones that don't, the goal is you don't even know. right? So I'm sure there's tons of people that read my website and are like, oh, man, she seems fun, but she's not for me. I want the ones who are like, I need to meet this person. Like, I want the hell yes. I want that. We don't want the people who are like, I'm not sure. It could be a fit. I'm not really clear on what they do. I don't know if this. You want people who are already like 80% in, and then you just need to do the rest.
There harkens back to our earlier comments about being an entrepreneur. You learn you've got to take care of every minute that you're working.
Yes.
And you're right. If your message automatically, how did you say it, does the vetting for you,
Yeah.
that saves you enormous time.
So much time. And also I think we also have this mistaken notion that we need everyone. And you don't. You need a core group of like rabid fans or dedicated customers or dedicated clients. And then they will tell their friends and so on and so on and so on. We don't need thousands and thousands and thousands unless you're trying to be Amazon. Most of us, dozens or 100 or hundreds is more than enough to keep us flush, so to speak. Yeah.
Flush, I like that.
Yeah. Flush.
Well, every now and then, I shouldn't say every now and then, I regularly ask
Yeah.
teenagers, I said, this is the person I'm interviewing. What would you ask them if you had the chance? And here's one of their questions. As the chief personality officer at More Than Words Marketing, how do you infuse creativity into content creation to make it more engaging for diverse audiences?
Oh, okay. So I think it depends on what we are saying about diverse.
Uh-huh.
But I guess if we're going to just say diverse as in like different types of people, right?
Yeah.
And different types of industries, the focus for me is we don't want to get uber creative, right? We're not trying to be so creative that we're just so obtuse. The creativity lies in the telling of the story. And so
Mm.
for my own messaging, the creativity is I have a newsletter, but I put off writing it because I never wanted it to be just another marketing newsletter, because who needs that? So the creativity for me was like, how do I reframe the conversation around messaging and what it means to put your personality out there and make it more story based, more relatable, something that was going to compel me to want to write it and hopefully compel other people to want to read it. And then for my clients, it's just weaving like so much about their childhood. All of us don't realize that there is something about how we grew up and how we saw the
Mm.
world or how we experienced the world. And I'm sure you know this, Madelyn, that directly shapes our approach to everything that we do. And
Yeah.
I help my clients creatively connect the dots so that their story is not just a laundry list of accomplishments.
That's not a story.
No, it's weaving the narrative together, and it's like it
Yes.
all started here and now I'm here, and how did I get there? So I think that's the creative piece.
Okay. This is so encouraging to me. one of the one of the talks that is one of the favorites of people, and they ask for it again and again, begins with, "I grew up on a farm,"
I love
and
it.
it's and I did it because I couldn't think of another way to get into the story that I wanted to tell, and, but instantly, even if people haven't grown up on a farm, they want to hear about it. So
Correct.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
It's that bringing that forward.
Like the idea with the creativity piece is just how do you start the conversation?
Yeah.
How do you get someone interested in you or whatever you're saying in a cluttered landscape, in a world where everybody's busy, in a world where no one reads? What is the hook or the crux or the thing that's going to get them to lean in and want to like learn more about whatever it is that you're saying? And that's going to come from the story.
From the story. And you have to tell me more
Okay.
because I've got this one. Okay, it
Mhm.
works, but I can't always begin all my talks with I grew
Right.
up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you could. I mean, well, maybe not growing up on a farm, but you could say.
Well, there has to be. I mean, they've often said to me, we couldn't figure out why you said that, but then as you go along, it's clear. So
Mm,
there really does have to be a through line from that opening. Um, what am I trying to ask you? I'm trying to, can we model this some way so that people can really get a sense? Because this is so important for people.
Yeah, I mean, so I could give you some examples.
Okay.
One of the things that I say, for better for worse, is that with personality brand, there's no formula. Because if there was a formula, then we'd all sound the same, which is, of course, not the point.
Right.
So it's giving people different ways to get into their story and to come up with their approach. So I do have like a lot of prompts that I can provide for people that just gets you started. One of them is like, I've spent my whole life X, or the through line of my career is, or for as long as I can remember, something like that that's going to maybe get you thinking. And then in terms of like some stories from clients, I have a client who is a communications coach. And she told me that growing up, she used to play with Ken and Barbie in her basement, and she would facilitate conversations between Ken and Barbie. And she realized that she's been facilitating conversations her whole life, right? So
Wow.
she took that, and then she went to the playground, and then she went to the corporate world, and now she's working with her clients on facilitating conversations. And, some people might think like, what is that? But it makes her more memorable than another coach who's just like, I do communication coaching. Like, I now know this person's been doing this. She's whimsical, she's playful, she's got a different way of approaching it.
Uh-huh.
And she's been fascinated by conversation her whole life. So that's more interesting.
Okay. Now I can begin to see
Yeah.
connection. Because for me, and I've shared this before with my audience, I'm a gardener.
Mm.
And I have been gardening since I was very little. I mean, I would
Planting seeds, right?
planting
It's a little
seeds.
obvious, but we could start there. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I did. I mean, that's
Yeah.
literally what I did.
Yeah.
And I remember well into my career recognizing that I'm a gardener of people as well.
Mm.
Because I can, I literally, when I'm especially when I'm working with young people, I can almost see in what's the seed there, and what's that seed, what's it going to really become,
Yeah.
and it's a gift, and I know it is.
And
So
what do you
that's
need to water it? And what do you need to maintain it? And what kind of
right.
environment is it going to thrive in? And
Exactly.
right,
Exactly.
is it a standalone plant? Does it need a lot of other plants? I
You
mean,
got it. You
100%.
got it. You
Yes.
got it.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Oh, thank you.
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah. Me too. I love being affirmed.
I think, but it's also right. It's more interesting, right? We all just want to
Yes.
talk about the things about ourselves that are more unique. And I just think there's an insight to how we all think that most people overlook when they talk about their professional careers, that it's just about what you've done and not about who you are and where you want to go and what you've shaped. And that to me is much more fascinating and relevant for the right client or employer or
Mm,
whoever you're talking to.
mm, hmm. I'm interested in also in another phrase you use, which is show, not tell.
Mm.
Uh, Now we've been talking about openings and language, but talk a little bit about showing, not telling.
So to me, telling is saying expert in, or right, 30 years of experience, things like that, that you're just telling me this. Show me instead. Give me an example. Tell me, show me something that you have, let's say, built from the ground up. Tell me about a project that has been really meaningful to you. Instead of telling me that you have decades of experience, how do we talk about that experience in a way that alludes to it without saying that exact thing?
Mm,
So it's, when you make movies, right? That's the whole thing with movies and script writing. It's like if you can show it visually, you don't have to write it. And even though everything I'm talking about is quote unquote written, we're writing something that is more um, detailed, more specific, and more unique than the tell, which is what everybody would do.
you know, going back to our earlier comments about story, some people really think incorrectly that the story is a narration of event,
Like a
event.
linear, yes, like
That's
a
right. And
timeline.
that is
Correct.
absolutely not what a story is.
No,
A story is, an opening that says, there's some possibilities here. Ooh,
correct.
but then there's a problem here. And then
Yes.
how do you resolve it? And so that's your emotions are constantly involved when you're hearing a story.
Yeah.
As I'm listening to you, that's what I'm hearing. Okay, so I've got to go through, for example, my website. I need to read every word. I do. I have to
You
read
do?
every word again for probably the time
Mm.
and measure it against this. Okay.
And I think, we should just acknowledge that not everybody's reading everything, of course, right? So some
Right?
people, when I tell people that your LinkedIn about section, that you get 2,600 characters, and people are like, God, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah, you use it all, but know that most people are not going to read it all. But
Yeah.
you're putting it there because that is your ownership of your story. It is the one place you get to say whatever you want, and people are going to skim, right? They're going to kind of scan through and pick out the things that are important to them, and you don't know what's going to be relevant or important for someone. So give them all the goodness.
Yeah.
And, if they don't need it, they don't need it. If they're not going to read it, that's fine, but you're writing it for the ones that will.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, we've sort of been talking as if our audience is always out there somewhere.
Mm,
What if your audience is your company? You're talking to your boss or you're
mm.
talking to your team or you know, does it change these dynamics?
I don't think it changes the dynamics. You still have to, whether or not you work for yourself or you work inside of an organization, it's all about visibility. And it is about branding in a way, because you have to be known for something, right? Your job title is essentially meaningless, right? It was not designed for you. All the tasks that you do in your role were written so that you could step into something. How you embody it is what makes you the unique person, the go-to person, the person that gets recognized for certain, tasks that maybe were not originally prescribed to that role. So to me, when you figure out how to differentiate yourself from your role and get known for something, and it could be known for, being the most thoughtful person in your team and that you
Hmm.
remember the birthdays, or you're noticing in a meeting who never gets called on and you're bringing that to the attention of your boss. Like, it's a subtle thing, but then all of a sudden people are going to be like, oh, I see that, like, Susie's really great at, like, recognizing who's not being called on in a room. Like, maybe we should involve her in whatever something is. So it's thinking about the things that we do well that we take for granted, but that would be valued by the right team, manager, organization. And how do you elevate those so that people are aware of them?
How would you, if, let's say you're 29, just
Okay.
take a number out of the air.
I am
You've been,
29. Just kidding.
I won't even pretend that.
Yes, how dare you? No, just kidding.
Okay. No, I picked that number because it's, you've usually by then have had maybe 3, 5 years of professional experience.
Mm,
You're looking to moving into that time in your life where you're going to get some promotions and things.
sure.
How, d- and yet you're still young and you're still forming. I'm sorry, but in your
Yeah.
20s, you're still forming. How do you learn what people see in you?
Okay, so the easiest thing is to ask.
Uh-huh.
I tell my clients, go ask 5 people in your life for 3 words that come to mind when they think of you.
Mm.
And this should be a diverse slate of people. So you can ask friends
Yes.
and family, ask a coworker, ask, an acquaintance, and I guarantee you that multiple people will come back with the same word or similar words. And that is the trait. That is the thing that people value in you. So I always get that I'm extremely, like, direct and honest. And a lot of people be like, "Yeah, what is that? It's like meaningless." It's like, well, but it's not, because people know that if they really want the truth,
Yeah.
I will tell it to them. And, like, most people will not, and they will sugarcoat it. And so it is that not for everybody. Some people have a hard time with that, but the ones that value it, that comes up over and over and over, that I will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So,
Woo, I love it. I love it.
um, so that's a really good way for people to start if they don't recognize it in themselves.
Mhm.
And I also feel like, again, this is usually something that you do so easily and so well, you're not even
You're
talking
not a
about it
I
and
think
leaning in, right?
I think that's a really good point. We're not always aware of what we're projecting to other people. And I also like the simplicity of your approach. Just go ask
Mhm.
them for 3 words.
Yep.
I've often suggested to people that they go and ask someone to tell them about a time when they did something for them. Well, that's a more
Oh,
complicated ask.
yeah, it's a little harder to think about maybe,
Yeah,
but that
but
could be a follow-up
it could be.
to
It
the
could
right?
be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the 3 words, very simple.
And the less like, and people are like, well, what? No, I'm like, no, no, that's it.
That's
Just
it.
what's 3 words that come to mind when you think of me? Done. Like, don't give them any guardrails, anything, and just see what happens.
Mm,
So it's also
that's
just like a lovely way to feel good about yourself when you realize, like, because this is what people see in you.
that's right.
And most of us are so busy trying to like learn new things and do other things that we're not using our natural abilities and gifts that other people appreciate. And those are the natural things that people appreciate.
Mhm. It's that affirmation again. Yep.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. We talked about that. Now, here's another question from the
Okay.
teenager.
Okay.
In the ever-changing marketing landscape, excuse me, I have to get the right words. How do you adapt and maintain authenticity while consistently connecting with audiences? Don't you love their questions?
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit I don't know that the changing landscape or anything has anything to do with it, because in my opinion, if you're being authentic to yourself, you're always going to be marketing authentically. I think it's about getting more comfortable with that piece of yourself and with that part of the business. And it is a baby step. And, I even talk about my own journey, but I was reluctant. I didn't understand the need to put myself out there. I just thought, people should be hiring me because I'm a really good writer and my work should speak for itself, like we all think.
We all think that.
It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And so it's the baby step of like, I'm going to put this out there and see how it feels. And I think you have to listen to what people are telling you and how they're responding. And if you're not getting the right types of people responding, if you're not getting calls back for jobs, or if you're not getting promotions or whatever, it's what is not connecting the dots in your messaging. Are you trying too hard? Are you pretending to be something you're not, or are you protecting yourself so much that it doesn't feel genuine? And I think it's getting comfortable with a little bit of vulnerability
Mm,
is, I think, the most authentic thing. And again, not uber vulnerable. We don't need to all be, everything out there, but a little bit of vulnerability, a little chink in the armor, a little something is going to go a lot longer than just pretending that everything is wonderful and terrific and amazing at all times.
mm. I think Brene Brown would agree
Yes,
with that one too.
correct. Exactly. Yes, she is someone that I quote often for
Do
sure.
you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love when she talks about the story I'm telling myself. I say that at least once a week about when you have an interaction with someone and it's like you feel a certain way, like what is the story I'm telling myself about what just happened versus what's the actual truth, and how do you get to that?
Mm. Say a little more about that.
It's like we are projecting onto a situation what we think somebody intended, and we don't really know that, because that is, chances are, something from our background and how we think that they are responding or saying something, when 9 times out of 10 they might have meant something completely different or it didn't come across that way. And this is especially true with like email or text, where you can't get tone. right? So you might
Yeah.
see something and be like have a visceral reaction, but like that's the story I'm telling myself. When really this person might have genuine good intent and I'm reading it in a certain way because maybe I've had a bad day, or so it's kind of like checking yourself before you tell yourself the story that may or may not be true.
This reminds me of a recent occurrence in my life where someone gave me some feedback,
Mm.
very direct. I mean, then they said, something about apologize if you have thin skin anyway, and they said something just really awful.
Mm.
And I said, how should I deal with that? So, and I realized what they were critiquing in me was me reflecting, doing what I had been told by a guru that I should be doing. So I said, cool. I wrote back to her and I said, you know what? I just laughed out loud because I was just doing what I was told to do.
And not what I really wanted to do or what I felt I should do or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Right? I love that.
I have to admit, it took me a little bit to think that went through.
Right, so the story you're telling yourself originally was, "Oh my god, this is like I'm a horrible person," or "This person's
Yeah, yeah,
horrible," when
yeah, yeah.
really it's, "This person is genuinely trying to give me feedback. They need something different from me, and I
Mhm.
gave them the wrong thing because I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
trying to be something I'm not."
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Goodness.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Now, can you share with the audience like a real example? As I know you, you have to protect your clients, and
Yeah, I don't know.
but give us an example of your when your approach had a really meaningful impact on the audience or the client.
I'm very fortunate because I feel like that is more the case than not,
Mhm,
and I think what I have learned is that so many people, because I do a lot of like speaking as well, and I speak to a lot of women in particular, but I do have male clients and non binary clients and all types of clients. But I think historically, if we're going to stereotype, women have been told to be a certain way. And like you said earlier, like we just feel like we have been trying to climb and prove for so long that we just can't like let our guard down and we don't know how to be ourselves anymore. And a lot of what people tell me is like when I talk about personality branding, it's like giving them permission to finally be themselves and letting them know that that's enough and it's okay. And so I do get a lot of feedback that it has changed how people think about themselves, which I love. And like one person once told me like I'll never look at a LinkedIn bio the same way again, and I was like, I can retire. That's it, right? It's like because it is just it's a reframing. That's all I'm ever really trying to do with people is reframe what does it mean to show up? How do you want to show up? And like letting you know that you're actually in the driver's seat. I think we think that these things happen to us, whereas really we can take control of what do you want people to know? What do you don't want people to know? And if it no longer serves you, it doesn't need to be there. We don't need to be talking about jobs or projects we've done that we never want to do again. It's not relevant. And like, I talk about like kind of like the closet clean out of the resume. It's like this jacket that's been sitting in the back of the closet for 10 years, you're never going to wear. So toss that jacket out, toss that job out. We don't need to talk about it. We're only talking about the things that we're still going to wear and are still on trend or, that kind of thing. So, yeah, but and most people will also say that like that little thing at the end of your LinkedIn is the most commented thing on their profile, right? That people always ask about whatever that fun nugget is. Like that's the conversation starter.
um, interesting. I, oh, that statement that you made, toss the jacket.
Yeah, the closet clean out of the resume.
Oh,
Let's
goodness.
purge. That's it. What are we doing?
But
So
I never thought about it with respect to jobs that you don't ever want to do again.
yeah,
I just hadn't thought about it, but you're absolutely right. Doesn't matter how well you did it. If that's not something you want to do again, why bring it out?
correct. And it doesn't mean we're like lying. I'm not saying we're
No,
hiding anything.
no,
But it's like you don't have to highlight it either, right?
that's right.
Highlight the things that you're most proud of or that you most want to keep doing or that most move you
Yeah.
forward. Again, like to your point, if you're in an interview, and it comes up, you can talk about things from your past that are, all of the things that we've all done have gotten us where we are, and they have shaped us. But, if you did something in a job 15 years ago that you don't ever want to do again, you don't have to tell someone you did it, you know? And I just think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for how to take control of what we want people to know about us. And we think it's just the culmination of everything we've ever done.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if there were, let's just say 3 points
Okay.
that you hope every listener today will take from this conversation, what would they be?
Okay, so not necessarily in this order.
All right.
'Cause I'm not a big I'm not a big list person. I always say, I'm like, you're never gonna get 5 ways or 3 things or whatever. But the first is you have more control than you think of your
Ah.
story. The second is the stuff that you do on the weekends is more interesting than what you do during your job. And that people genuinely want to get to know you, and putting more of yourself out there is actually easier than pretending to be something you're not and constantly hiding who you are. And so the more that you can be comfortable, the more that you're likely to show up with more confidence and do the best work that you can, because pretending to be something you're not is exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Mm. I wonder if that's why when we start a new job, it's so tiring. Everybody
Mm.
says, "Oh, it's because you're learning the job." But you know what? In that time, you're right. You hide yourself a little bit because you want to see what the feel of the environment is before you begin to reveal.
Yes.
That's a great insight. Thank you, Madeline. You got that
Yeah,
insight.
no, I mean, I think that's definitely I think it's also just newness, overwhelm, etc. But yeah, you
Yeah,
don't know who's going to be your friend, who's
that's right.
gunning for you, right? If you took somebody's job, you don't know.
Mhm.
And you don't know what the culture is like enough yet to know
That's right.
what's maybe okay to share and what's not okay to share. And it is that slow peeling back of the onion of, again, what can I start to share with these people and what's going to be accepted versus what might ostracize me or
Right.
that sort of
Right.
thing. So yeah, that's an interesting, and it's the same with like a new client. If you work for yourself, it's like, what
Yes.
is this new client interested in knowing about you and what might be too far?
Yeah,
And that's a lot of emotional intelligence goes into all of this, of course. If you don't have a
absolutely.
strong EQ, you're going to struggle with everything. But if you have a good EQ,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to make it easier.
Okay. What question would you wish I had asked you today?
Oh, I don't, there's nothing that's like glaring to me that you've missed, but you haven't asked me like what I do for fun. How about that?
You're right. I didn't. What do you do for fun?
Well, I mean, so many things. I'm definitely like someone who does a lot and takes advantage of living in New York City.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm a huge CrossFitter, so I like to throw around very heavy weights. So I love a
Wow.
barbell. That's my thing. Something about a
Wow.
barbell that just makes me feel strong and empowered and capable. And yeah, it's definitely shown me a side of myself that I didn't know existed.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, there's absolutely nothing attractive about a barbell to me.
Oh, see, and that's what makes the world go round, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly. Exactly.
and
Well,
what do
great.
you give me one fun thing? What's a fun thing that you love to do?
I love to design clothing and then actually construct it.
So, do you sew? You have a sewing machine?
I have multiple sewing machines.
Okay. So, if we have quickly time, so I did have a client who also sews, and we married her love of sewing to how she approaches her job. And she does like customer success and project management. And she's like, I like doing one thing at a time, kind of like when you work on a piece of clothing or a pattern, you're getting it all ready before you build it, and you're making sure you have everything together before assembling it. And she's like, that's how I approach my work. It's like she's make sure that everything is happening before they move forward and that all the
Oh,
parts and
now
pieces
that's
are there.
interesting because that's not where I get my jollies.
Interesting.
My jollies, because remember, it's the design portion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm constantly in my mind shifting spatial, uh, it's spatial movement. So
Sure.
you're moving a piece that's not necessarily flat, it's round.
Oh, right.
And
Okay.
that to me is the real fun part. I
The
mean, it's
constant.
hugely fun. I also, by the way, put jigsaw puzzles together.
One of
I
my friends does that too. She's a huge puzzle person,
Yeah.
right? But see, that's so interesting, right? So, like this person that I know, she calls herself a sewist. You're more of a clothing designer.
Yeah,
It's like the same thing, but two completely different approaches, and
that's right.
how you're approaching it and what you're getting out of it are
You got
very
it.
different. And
You
that's
got it.
again, that's the good stuff.
That's the
That's
good
the good
stuff.
stuff.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. Danielle, this has been such a pleasure
I loved it.
talking with
Thank
you.
you. You too, Dr. Blair.
Uh, ah, well, again, thank you so much for your time today and your authenticity.
Thank you.
I felt I was talking to a real person today.
Oh, that is the biggest compliment. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
It was lovely. I really enjoyed it.
Good. All right. Well, I have a confession to make because we're about to go into grounds for thought. Now, here's the really special news about that. When I was trying to name this little segment, I didn't know what to call it. And it was Danielle in conversation with her who came up with the wonderful name of Grounds for Thought. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. When I decided to interview Danielle Hughes, I knew I had to have a book about marketing. I mean, surely there would be a book that has influenced me. When I went to my shelves, the book just seemed to jump off into my hands. It was Love Marks, The Future Beyond Brands by Kevin Roberts. And if you look carefully, you will see it is full of Post-its. It was published in 2005, and I can still remember getting my first copy. It's a book that exceeds expectations from the get-go. And as I looked at the book again, I realized that of all my books, it has the most Post-its of any book in my library. And as I began going through it so that I could tell you about the real impact of the book on me, I was stunned at how difficult it was going to be. I mean, those Post-its marked pages of outstanding quotations, eye-stopping images, exemplary stories. You get the point. Here's a sampling. In it, it says the essential difference between emotion and reason is that emotion leads to action, while reason leads to conclusions. I want you to think about that the next time you have to make a, quote, a rational business decision. Don't worry, there's emotion in it. Then Roberts leads you to a list of emotions that finally lead to the most fundamental one. And he says it in a graphic that covers 2 pages. Yes, it's love. And that's exactly what it looks like across 2 pages. When you tap into this, he says, you have a love mark. And then there are examples. And his own personal love mark is a sport team. In his research, he found that successful teams always lionize their past. He says, the New Zealand All Blacks are my own favorite team, my personal love mark. They are one of the most successful teams in the history of sport. The All Blacks have a saying that sums it up. Preserving your body never enters your mind. Preserving your history never leaves it. But there are some more common love marks that he talks about. Cheerios. Let's see if I can get that up because I think it's an important one to see it when I say it. Cheerios is out of the bowl and into the heart of the family. How lovely can you get? And yet another example was the strategy that had tied Speak to Mothers at the point of dirt, and to reassure her that in that instant, Tide would be right alongside her to clean up the mess. Now think about what that means in terms of feeling love for the product as if the product feels love toward you. The premise of the book seems like it could be trivial. Yet the more you read, the more you see how tapping into the emotion of love when talking with the customer, the more powerful the connection and the potential that the product becomes a love mark. Now, I'm not a sport team and I don't sell cereal or detergent, so I find it hard to think about history or heart or dirt, well, other than perhaps metaphorically. Then I read this quote from Robert. Respect is love in plain clothes. Wow. I can very much relate to respect. That one statement about respect being love in plain clothes made it all real for me. I know how to show someone respect. Respect is not sweet or trivial and never solicits cynicism because it's a reflection of authentic acceptance. The person shown respect has a sense of having been seen, having been heard, and having been honored. Just think about what Danielle was telling us earlier about authenticity. The modus operandi for potentially creating a love mark for me has been to show respect. That was the lesson, the gem that I took from this book. Love Marks by Kevin Roberts. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you're ready to explore how to build your resilient leader with me as your coach, schedule a conversation by sending me an email to madelyn@madelynblair.com. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe so that you'll never miss one of my amazing guests again. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.